Hello and welcome to episode 105 of Page 1, the Writers Podcast. I'm Marco.
And I'm Tarek.
And thanks for joining us for the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, see how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips as possible. And this season has been largely dominated by authors, although we did have Georgia Pritchett on, who's written things such as The Thick of It and Succession as a screenwriter. But we have this week I think it might be our first writer-director.
I think that's right, yeah, absolutely. Now, I wasn't actually here for this episode, unfortunately, so I can only apologise in advance for the poor quality that no doubt this episode is going to take. I'm only kidding, of course. I'm sure it's absolutely fantastic.
This is obviously the best interview we've ever done because Tarek wasn't there to take it off the rails.
Well, I'll be honest. Because I wasn't there, I'm going to let Marco say this week who the guest was and some of the interesting facts which I've been reading about him.
Yeah, so this week's guest is Leroy Kincaide, who is, as I say, a debut writer-director. His first film, The Last Rite, is just out, but he, as I talked to him about in the interview, he had a very colourful background. He was a professional wrestler and actually held the world record for the the largest number of choke slams in a minute.
Most choke slams in 1 minute. I mean,
there you go.
I mean, but unfortunately, listeners, you'd be very sad to hear that Marco did not ask him how this was achieved. In my mind, I'm imagining, was he fighting them off one by one and then getting it, or were people lining up, waiting to be choke slammed in a queue? I find this fascinating.
I know.
As someone who's never really watched wrestling, I find this I would love to have seen this massive spectacle.
It's a missed opportunity by me. Although I do speak to him about the wrestling. I also speak to him about why he wanted to go from that career into writing and directing. He sort of went from wrestler to actor to then writing and to then creating his own feature. So it's a really inspirational journey, inspirational story in a way, because he had no formal training on this and he's taught himself, and now his film The Last Rite is now available to stream on various services, I think, in the UK. So it's a good interview. I will warn you that he does swear a few times. We have no problem with that, but I just want to say that in case you're in a car full of kids or anything like that. But we'll get straight into the interview after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the podcast with a bit more chat and to let you know about our future plans, because this is the last episode before we take a short break. But we'll tell you more about that after the episode.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realised it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page 1. Page 1 is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page 1.
With these podcasts, I normally start with the question, did you always want to be a writer? But you in particular have had a very interesting career path. You were a professional wrestler, I think, at one stage. You've been an actor. So, how did you find yourself writing and directing at this stage?
Yeah, I guess like most aspiring actors, let's say, I got very fed up with not really, one, getting work, but two, getting typecast in a way which I didn't quite like. I felt it fit too many tropes that typically go along with someone being mixed race or black with a bit of a build. So you're only going to go and be a thug, or you're going to go and be a this or a that. Typical trope type of mentality in how you're cast. So I just started writing tiny segments, I guess, really tiny segments. Like they'd start out to be like an action scene, because I used to, obviously what you said, it used to be back in the day, used to be a professional wrestler, segued from that into acting, and I used naturally part of that performance ability to sort of go on screen. So it just naturally became, I'd write these little action short little pieces, and slowly they would grow and grow and grow. And then, I guess 2017 was when I got bit with the writing, directing bug, because obviously I was writing parts for myself, but what I did is I started wanting to write. I just found it was a very very good way to articulate and express myself internally by escapism, and creating these like abstract characters and worlds and environments. And then, here we are today.
And I was going to ask if there was, I mean, you sort of alluded to it there. Is there, even in the world of professional wrestling, when you're a wrestler, you're kind of a showman and you're an entertainer and you're telling a story in a way with what's happening in the ring, etc. Does that, I mean, am I right in that? Is there an element of storytelling in what you were doing there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Professional wrestling is all about storytelling, if I'm honest. You have a good guy and a bad guy. You might have a build up to a match, and then the build up to the match leads to the story having a beginning, middle, and an end. Be it the end is, it's a cheap shot victory by the bad guy, or the good guy is to go over and win and save the day. It's very much about that. But I think what the wrestling sort of allowed, I would say, for a lot of people, is the escapism of witnessing a real life superhero of some sort, and allowing them to be sort of like live and direct with those people that were able to, kick ass and take names during a show, and the other people and kids could live their self vicariously through those characters. It's really similar to film, I guess, in some ways. But then there's obviously a lot of ways there's not similar. So quite similar.
Yeah, and so in 2017 you started writing with these sort of action scenes and then building that out. But did you, what was the basis for being able to write the scripts? Was it the fact that you had been an actor, or did you have any experience in writing? Did you go on any courses or anything like that?
So to start off in my earlier stages of writing scripts and stuff like that, I just wrote, I wrote inherently what I felt made sense to write. So I think by osmosis, naturally, there's a storyteller in everybody, but it's like having a talent, but then developing on the talent requires the skill set that goes into being able to tell a story in the best possible light that you want to tell it. So what I found was, I just wrote stuff in the earlier days, and then realized that basically towards the end of my earlier days of writing that I needed an additional set of skills that went into being able to help me set up a world, let's say, or be able to find the truth of the characters. And weirdly, it's like I think I was overthinking too much back in the days, as opposed to being able to just let the story flow. But it's like having a rule book without following the rules, but you know the rules inherently, so you naturally just stick to it.
Yeah.
So what I did in end of 2017 is I went on like an online script writing course to do with like horror. You know, I love horror. Horror, action, and sci-fi is definitely going to be the direction that my career as a writer director goes. But like, you know, after doing this course, I don't want to say like it gave me like the cheat code of understanding anything, because I think you're always still learning.
Yeah.
But what it did, and again, I say it's osmosis, because I think we inherently know the truth, but it takes awareness to realize that you knew what you've just been taught all along.
Yeah, that sort of validation that what you were doing is correct and everything. Yeah.
But you know, it was more about understanding it to the point of where, okay, I sort of sensed my way to where I wanted to go, but I need to refine some of these other areas to be able to get much better as a storyteller. So, you know, the course, it helped me realize where I was. It helped me realize that, you know, there's more things that need sort of tweaking. There is a sequence of some sort that you need to find for your story, but you don't have to just stick to that. And then after that, I just sort of, you know, from 2017 to now, I've wrote a few other scripts and got other concepts sort of in the percolator, just bubbling up, waiting to be wrote. So,
I mean, that's a good time to ask about. Obviously, your first feature is now out, called The Last Rite, which you wrote and directed. Before we talk about it, do you just want to give us a brief summary of what it's about?
Yeah, so the Last Rite is a supernatural horror feature that's, I would say that I wanted to make more grounded in not real life, but more grounded in a less Hollywood portrayal of a supernatural horror. I think it was very important for that story, you know, The Last Rite, to have some you know, really interesting theme, but also be grounded in something that people that might have had certain afflictions of some sort might be able to relate to. So I'd had an experience of sleep paralysis quite a few times. So what I wanted to do was to ground this story around elements of that. So it's a supernatural horror that sits between the worlds of Exorcism of Emily Rose and Amityville Horror. And that pretty much is an overview without giving any more away.
Yeah.
If your audience want to have a watch, feel free.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And I mean, when you were, obviously you started out writing, you said shorter things, and then this is a feature, obviously your first feature that's been made. One of the questions we often ask is, you know, how, when you have an idea for a story, how do you decide, or how do you know this is a fuller story, this is going to be a feature, this isn't going to be a short, this needs time to breathe and things like that?
I think the key to any writer, this is more definitely an individual perspective, is you've got to know how to identify what inside of you, what is the idea that sticks. You know, we can all have ideas. Ideas, everybody's got an idea. You know, you go down to the corner shop and someone's got an idea for a film. You know, everybody's got an idea. But if you can sit with an idea long enough that one, doesn't leave you, and two, begs to be told. Now, only us as the individual writer will know when is the right time to get in the mix. I think the key with writing is actually to take your ego and put that aside, because sometimes the things we want to write is not the thing we should write. And the thing that's sort of secretly underneath, just trying to poke its way to the surface, is the thing we should stick to.
Yeah.
So the Last Rite, as an example of that, I look at the Last Rite like one was an exercise to exercise a lot of things that I hadn't quite tried, and it allowed me to get those out.
Mm-hmm.
It allowed me room to breathe and to explore, because I know that like there's one bite at the apple, and then after that probably a lot of things will change. You know, you'll make a film and you'll have other people involved, and you'll have all this money and all this other stuff. So I said to myself about what's going to be different with the Last Rite, and how am I going to go forward and make that happen. I had to identify, was this a story I needed to do first? It didn't leave me alone, so I knew it was the one that I needed to write. So for me, everyone's ideas come to them differently, but I had, let's say, a vision of a guy stood on a set of stairs in silhouette. I don't know why I saw this man on the set of stairs in silhouette with a hat, but I did. And it was like, you know, it would be there every day. I'd wake up, I'd just see this guy. You know, I hadn't actually seen a guy, but in my mind, I'd seen this character. And then and I was like, okay, John, let me just draw it. So I drew it. You know, I drew it, when was it? 2018, probably like June, July, I drew it. And I was like, right, what does this mean? I'm asking myself, like, what am I doing in this moment? Why have I just drawn this character or this random mysterious person? And then slowly but surely, things from my past started to pop up. I started to remember, like, oh, I remember hearing of shadow figures, you know, demonic possession and stuff like that. I was like, okay, is this an idea? Like, because it's really weird as a writer, you have so many internal dialogues, and I think it's quite healthy. It's quite psychotic, but quite healthy. And you have to ask yourself, like, in these moments, like, is this the idea that I'm going to tune into? Because I think once you tune into the resonantial frequency that's going to connect you to your story, I don't know, some people can segue between different things. I'm not that good at that. I tune into it, and that's all consuming every day, day in, day out. So I started sort of exploring a couple of things on the internet. I had a little look at some shadow figures and things like this, and I was like, okay, I feel like this is going to be a story. So then what I did is I just literally opened up Word, and I said, okay, if it's going to be the story, let's write. So I think sometimes the blank page is the most exhilarating thing, but can be sometimes the most scariest thing. But a lot of the time it's all about being relaxed, you know, and allowing ideas that come to you, come in, write them down, throw away the ones you don't want, tune into the ones you like, and then just feel it. So after I'd seen this guy, after I'd watched Shadow Figures, I found the best through line that I can connect to is I need to tell a story. It's definitely that. I need to be authentic as possible. The way to do that is to figure out, how do I communicate my experience as someone sleeping or having sleep paralysis with weird things happening? How do I communicate that in a story that's not me? And then I just figured a few things out, played around, had a character, one character led to another, and then just identified from that, I guess, the theme in terms of where does this character go, what happens, and what's the through line between the story from start to finish. And, you know, once I discovered a couple of things, I just literally just started writing.
Well, I was going to ask about that. I mean, in your talk about your process a bit there, because are you someone that, it sounds like you're someone that, like a lot of writers, will have these ideas and sort of let them bubble away, and other strands will come up, and it's when those strands connect that you start to really roll with that idea. But do you like to, once you've got that stage, once you're at that stage, do you like to plan out the whole thing before you then start writing, or do you sort of write and see where it goes?
So, I was saying about processes, like Last Rite allowed me to do some different things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what I realized about the Last Rite and my process is Last Rite, I felt my way through the story and I just wrote it. There was a story I wrote before that called Facility 7, where I did, the revision card thing. I wrote everything down scene by scene, and I broke that scene down much more than the Last Rite. The only way to really know your process is you have to try something, learn from that, try something else, learn from that, and then decide where you're going to go.
Yeah.
So my process 100% now is definitely the revision cards. I find just having a God view of the story really makes some difference. And I think the difference it makes, it allows me to physically just see it before I start diving in and zeroing in on things. I'm very cautious to not overdevelop when I'm in this stage. I don't like to know too much about the characters. I don't like to know an awful lot about really too much to do with characters. All I need to know is like at which points things happen relatively. They can move slightly. What's my end? And I do sometimes like to know the way I'm flowing through to the story's end, because a lot of the time, because I've sat with things for quite a while, I've sort of watched the movie anyway before I've got to this point. So I know that there's the through line through the characters to how they get to this stage. And then now it's about, once I've had my God mode moment from top eye looking down, I then literally put it all together, put it in the cupboard, throw it away. And then that's when the magic starts coming into it. I find a lot of the time, once I know that there's this beginning, there's the middle, I can see that, there's the end. I find once I get the vomit draft out, and not like, I don't just believe in just writing anything for the sake of it, just so you can fill up a page and then revising it later, because I think you can write yourself into oblivion if you did that. But if you took your time before you start writing on, Final Draft or whatever software you're using, you've got a very good idea of where you're going. So when you need to adapt a scene or two, it's not going to radically shift the entire story. Whereas if you don't really know where you're going, and if I'll be honest, like the one thing that why I think this is my process, might not work for everybody, is that when I did the Last Rite, I didn't do this process. I just put it in a Word document, scene by scene, put it in there and allowed that to happen. And then that found its way into Final Draft. But what I do is I do this now additional step, which I've realized is my thing. And that is transferring that to revision cards. I don't know. I guess it's maybe a way I learn or something, but I find having something tangible that I can touch in physical format, it's like seeing your first draft of the script when you printed it out. There's something about just seeing it physically in the world that makes you feel like it's finally something.
Brings it to life a bit. Yeah, absolutely. And was it always the intention that you were going to direct this yourself? Because when we've spoken to other screenwriters on the podcast, one of the things that they keep coming back to is that when you make a film, you can write the script, but you have to then hand it off. And at that stage, 100 different voices start pecking away at what you've written, and you kind of just have to accept that as part of the process. But if it's a film like The Last Rite, which is a smaller budget, and you are more in control of it, you have a bit more control. Was that always the intention with this one? As a storyteller, obviously I naturally fit the bracket of being a multi-hyphenate, director, editor, but ultimately I just look at it as storyteller. I'm just conveying
a story to people. So I'm communicating, as a director, working with the brushes, which are the actors. They are like the things that bring it to life. But it's like, I'm communicating to them. That's a version of telling the story. I write, that's another way of telling the story. If I'm editing, that's another way of telling the story. I think the good thing is to have a very eclectic set of tools that you can use, that then eventually you don't need to use, because you will work with other people to help bring things to life. But in the earlier stages, I think you're sort of bound by blood to make it by any means necessary. I think, I do believe, like the writer. Yeah, I will say this. I do believe that the writer is ultimately God when it comes to story. I'm not a director that would work with a writer and want to impose my vision on that writing if I worked with a writer, because the thing is everybody's got an idea on their perspective on what they should be saying in this story, but there's only one way you're ever going to see the truth of the story, and that's on the writer themselves. Because the writing is a process where I believe it's quite spiritual. Like, I don't want to get all godly and stuff, but I do believe that we are ultimately used in a way to communicate or convey a message to the world through story. I have a process that I naturally feel when I'm in a writing mode, and when I'm connected to that, like, I'll be honest, I don't really think when it comes to writing. So I channel whatever it is through me into the page and whatever, and I feel these people and characters come into life. They're like people I know, but I don't know them. They're there. And when people who have an idea on what these people ultimately are about try telling you, like, this is what you've got to do, maybe do this, maybe do that, but all they've got is their own perspective. And what I'm talking about is not people directly linked to writing, although like people that might have a suggestion. And I'm not saying there's not good suggestions, because obviously there are, but the thing is, if everybody gives you a suggestion and you blow in the wind like a bloody, a weed, taking every bit of note and direction and here and there, you end up far from your vision. And the thing is, as a director that writes, the one thing I'm very steadfast on is respect to the characters in the story. And I'm definitely not someone that's gonna bastardize my characters because people think that they've got an idea better than mine. Because if you've got an idea better than mine, you go and write your story then. Because I've had conversations and meetings, I'm there to talk about the project we're working on, or like the stuff that we're in, and then people are like, oh yeah, I've been thinking of an idea as well. With all due respect, I don't give a fuck about your idea. we're talking about this, and you telling me about your idea. Go fucking write it then. Now, I know it's not popular discussion, because people were like, oh yeah, don't write like this, write like that, la la la. Now, I'm quite an expressionate writer, so I don't believe in writing staccato. I don't like writing staccato. I think it's very bland, and it's very it's just very boring. Like, as an actor, if I'm reading a piece of literature and what I'm seeing on the page is guy walks in, goes over, da da da,
and it's very technical, isn't it?
Yeah. And the idea is that because you don't want to impose on anybody's vision and direction or whatever, and I get that, I do get that. So like my work, when you read it, is very much like you can see the vision and the aesthetic, but I'm going to be the one directing it. I'm never going to be a paid writer. I don't want to be a paid writer because that's not what I'm about. But what I do believe in is that I do think that there's not enough respect for writers, and I will champion that for the rest of my career, because I think if I took someone else's script, and I said this earlier, and I was going to direct it, the most important thing for me because I've wrote and gone through a process. It's not about getting the aesthetic and getting the vision and how it looks down. It's making sure that these characters stay true to who they are throughout the entire movie and not just segueing them off because it makes the most sense for budget or whatever. Now, you might have to nudge characters in a slightly different way to get something across because of the budget. Now, that's unfortunately something we might have to deal with as writers, but those things are not too bad. It's the things where you pass off a bit of work and then people are trying to make commentary on an aesthetic around a couple, for example. So like in my next project, there's a couple that are not a couple that was a couple. They're never supposed to feel like a couple, even though they're close to being like a couple. It's important that they're not a couple. There's been a note that I've seen where people want to see them as a couple, but they're not a couple. They're an ex. She's there, he's trying to win her over. That's the story or part of it. If people don't in this story, if people are not vibing that, then they're not going to be the right people that I end up working with. And I'm very headstrong when it comes to my ideas, and I'm not about not making changes that are necessary. But if it's a case of making it and it's a case of waiting to the right time to make it, I will be waiting to the right time to make it, because I could not imagine. Actually, no, sorry. I've seen it once. I was working on a independent project in Romania. It was just before shooting The Last Rite, and there was this team. I was just doing some like acting / stunty sort of work on it, and the production are working with this writer, and the directors come in from LA, and there's all this stuff going on. And I remember seeing the writer like sat in the corner, like probably most days, and he looked so stressed out. Like, I couldn't tell you the stress that this guy looked like he was going through. And I think what had happened is he'd been sold a bit of a pipe dream, like, oh, we really want to make your story, blah, 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 blah. And he got onto set, come to set, and he had this idea of all these characters. And I could see it on his face, man. And I felt really sorry for him. And the production basically, in a roundabout sort of way, just used the story to communicate whatever they had intentions for. Had no intention of sticking true to writing. They changed all this stuff last minute. All these characters were just making random decisions that had no through line at all. It just whatever they were doing. And I just never will forget how stressed this guy looked. And I can't imagine what it's like building something for, like, you sit with an idea for like a couple of years. And then you build these ideas up to where that there's heart and soul in there because you've connected to it in a way. And now it's about not just your perspective, it's about just sharing that to allow these other collaborators to come on board and build it. And they just stripped it apart and fucked it. And that was the result. And I was like, wow, I'm never going to be that guy. I'd rather not make it, if I'm honest.
So I'm sure our listeners would like to know, like, how do you go about, if you have a similar vision to yours, where you want to write something, you want to direct it and stuff, what was the process of actually getting a film like that made? I can't imagine that was easy to do.
No. I mean, it took a couple of questions to be asked first. I was fortunate enough when I came up with the idea to be on a project where I was about to just get like a little bit of money, not a lot of money at the time. It was like about $6-7 grand, I think I was getting paid for this bit of work. But it allowed me some money to be able to go, well, I've got a tiny bit of money now, not a lot, just a tiny bit. Maybe could we make something with some of this? So my partner, who also works alongside me, Chloe Chudasama, she's a producer. So we work on projects together because it's just natural. Like, you know, we're a couple, but also we work very well together. You know, there's no one not afraid to share what they think, and no one's hiding nothing. We're like two people on the same journey. You know, we sort of had this conversation with her in 2018. Was just saying, like, look, you know, do we have ideas for things? We was going to shoot a proof of concept for a film I still want to make called Facility 7. We was going to shoot a proof of concept for that. Now, we'd just bought a camera, or we was just looking at getting cameras and stuff to shoot this little proof of concept. And now we was like, well, maybe we don't do that. What about if we shoot a feature? We chewed it out a little bit and was like, well, it could be done. You know, I'm going to have some money when I come back from Colombia. Maybe we can club together and make something work. So that was basically the vibe of the conversation. Now there's much more to it than that. You know, I had to spend a load of time learning about cinematography in a way which is the detail of a DOP would learn. Now that's really, I'm thankful for that process, if I'm honest, because I've learned so much more of being able to communicate a message as a director by understanding elements of cinematic language, lighting techniques, and color contrast, and things that help build a tone.
Yeah.
Not just the tone of the story, but a tone into the aesthetic of how it looks as the story. So I guess you could say it was a process, you know, just like when I started fine-tuning my writing. It was, you know, I had to go on a bit of a course. I had to write a little bit, like to finesse it a bit more, and then gradually, slowly but surely, it starts to happen. It's the same thing with this. So, you know, I had to level up on a few areas. I had to level up on my editing. I had to level up on my color grading because I had to do all of that. Now, I think the key is as well is like if someone's going to do it, is not to think about it in a way where you go, oh my God, I've got to write, I've got to direct, I've got to do the cinematography, I've got to do all these things. Well, holy fuck, it's like 20,000 different things you've got to do. The key is not to think of it like that. The key is to think of it like do it in stages, you know, write the script, get the script done. Okay, now how do you do it? Well, need a camera. Cool, get a camera. Whatever camera you can get. If it's a case of just communicating a message, that would be the way to do it. I know it's not ideal. You know, we might all see our films being up there like Hollywood blockbusters, but ultimately, if it's a case of conveying an idea and a message and you want to make it happen, by any means necessary, you can do it. It just might take a little longer. It just might take a lot more of your blood, sweat, equity to go into the work.
Yeah.
If you're willing to pay that, like all things are possible, you know, because I think like, you know, I'm not saying that like The Last Rite is groundbreaking and changing the world for a better place. You know, it's not about that. It's like, but we had little to no help going in, like literally little to no help. And, you know, between Chloe, myself, and the sound guy, we were the three crew members that really made it happen. Around that, you know, we had a couple of people that came in and out with makeup and stuff. You know, it worked in some respects. You know, people can do the best they can do, but unfortunately, you know, not everyone starts a journey with you finishes, you know, and there were processes we had to go through. And sometimes it became easier to just have the three of us than it did to have anyone else, because people like you storytelling, right? You show someone the script and people are like, oh my God, I think this character should be this or that or whatever. It's the same sort of thing. You know, people have got their idea on what they want to do in the journey, and some people want to work with it and some don't. And if you can navigate these things that try to derail you, you can in the end be left with something that, you know, you can be proud of, but also like, yeah, you know, you can improve on things, you know, you want it better. But the fact is you've done something a lot of people tend to not ever do, and that's get something made.
Absolutely.
Because it's like, you know, like today, like literally today, the 4th of April now, it's like, you know, our film through all of this process, it literally comes out on Sky today. Like I didn't anticipate it ever getting to that. I thought we would get it maybe somewhere. I was thinking, we might get it with Gravitas Ventures in the States. I was like, you know, maybe, you know, like we're just a couple of people making a film, and you know, as luck would have it, you know, with God's blessing, we got it where it is. So, you know, for anyone out there listening, I would just say, just if you can do it, just go and bloody do it, and don't let anything stop you.
You have to be quite single-minded by the sounds of it, but and you were nominated for Screen International's 2021 Genre Rising Star Award as well. Does that sort of thing give you some validation in terms of what you're trying to do?
I'm going to sound very atheist people now. Do you know, the one thing I learned as a child, you know, I had a experience in my life, and it, you know, like, you know, I went through school, I had special needs, I was in fucking all the bottom groups for everything. English was my worst subject out of anything in school. I would say anybody's opinion of you is not your reality, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And as great as it is to be nominated for stuff, I don't really give a fuck. And the reason why I don't is because I don't look for outward validation for what I do. And 100% in life, we spend so much time battering ourselves based on what everybody else thinks. And nobody knows better than you. Nobody knows better for what's right or what's wrong for your life. Only you know ultimately what's going to be the best thing for you to make as a decision. Now, I believe very much so in, if I'm going to fall on anyone's sword, I'd rather it be mine. Because the most important thing is, like, if I make a mistake, I make the mistake. It's not I've made a mistake because someone else has validated me to do something and I've made their mistake in my work. So for validation, I think it's great to get recognized, like it is. It's nice. But for when it comes to seeing myself as a creative or a storyteller or writer, director, I don't listen to anything else outside of it. If people were like, you are the worst guy, I don't give a fuck, because I think the key is, like, I've got to tell these stories authentically, and they're not authentic as long as I'm doing it to chase an algorithm, to chase what's current in the trends, to chase all these things. Because if I'm chasing everybody else's validation, I'm not staying true. I don't think, as a storyteller.
You're not telling your own story in a way. Absolutely.
Yeah, but you know, absolutely. But the guys, I will say, at Fright Fest, that connected the whole thing up and then got me in front of people, like, I will say, even though I've just said all of that, I do think that it's great when you connect with people that see some of what you've got as potential. Don't have to be there yet, but see the potential. And I, you know, I do owe a little bit of respect to the guys down there for allowing me to have the film shown, but also, you know, without those guys down there, I would never have been in front of the Screen International panel. So, you know, thankful for meeting the right people as well.
And so, the Last Rite, as you say, is out today to stream or watch on Sky. But what are you working on next? What's in the pipeline?
So the next project I'm currently working on is a horror feature film. Sits a bit like between The Strangers meets Midsummer. It's a little bit in that cult sort of arena. It's a home invasion horror film. Yeah, so this one I'm looking at like really pushing the boundaries with home invasion. I really want to make people feel quite uncomfortable, not for any purpose of trying to make people purposefully feel uncomfortable. I think that if you look at facts and fiction, I think fact is a lot more stranger than fiction. And a lot of people tend to not really be so aware of how dark the world can be. And my work inherently involves light and dark energy. So what I do is with the research, I stumble into stuff and things find their way into my work. Now, some of the things that happen are, I don't want to say inspired by true events, but they're definitely inspired by people in this world that have done horrific stuff.
Mm.
So what I'm aiming to do as a storyteller on this one is really want to push the needle and go, oh, that's a bit dark. Yeah, but you know, if you look at this guy who did this, you'd see, the world is relatively messed up. You know, it's like, what is it, Hostel? Hostel was inspired partly by a website, I believe, in Thailand. You know, and I mean, like, well, you pay a load of money and go and do all that. That's just, yeah, we've lost it at that point. But it's interesting.
So what stage is that at just now? Are you just in the early stages of that at the moment?
No, I'm currently on draft 6 of that one. I'm currently adding some additional elements to the beginning of the story. I felt like we could do with experiencing a bit more of the protagonist's, how should we say, life experience before the moment. Because the way I wrote The Last Rite was one way. The way I'm pulling this one in is very different. So this one is very much like, it's a lot faster paced in terms of what starts happening in the story. But there's these little nuggets of this character's personality that I think that ultimately really do affect the way we as the audience will perceive her. And I don't want to leave parts of her out, because I think these little parts are quite important. So I finished that last night, and I've got, what I've got to do, I've got to look at like some elements of like the cult atmosphere and stuff like that. I think it's relatively there, but I just want to double check just to make sure that I'm happy with that.
So are you hoping to shoot that later this year or something?
Yeah, well, the plan is with the film's called Hollow Ones, by the way. I forgot, I didn't even mention the name. Yeah, the film's called Hollow Ones. So that film we're hopefully aiming to get going by later this year, early next year. You know, it's a case of like looking for the funding and stuff for this one now. You know, could we do it how we've done The Last Rite? Probably, but you know, the thing is we want to level it all up, and to level it up we sort of need to work with the right team of people to help facilitate the idea. So that's the goal at the moment.
What was the last book that you read?
I'll be honest, I don't read.
Okay.
I don't read. Yeah, you could put it down to like, I don't want to say like the label thing, but I just where I went through school and just struggled with reading and writing. Reading's just not something that comes very natural. I'm sure I could develop that skill, but the way I learn just means that I observe very, very, very well. So because of that, I just I watch a load of videos. That's pretty much where I get my learning from.
That leads me on to the next question, which is, what was the last film that you watched?
The last film, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, actually.
The new one or the
new one? Yeah, the new one. That was the last one.
What was it like?
Yeah, it was really good. Really good. There were elements. There was an element that I was like, oh man, just guys, you know. So just spoiler alerts, guys out there.
Yeah.
Just about to go into something. yeah, so there's a moment where I think this is cardinal sin. You just don't do this in horror. You don't do it. You leave the burning house. You're free. You can run off into the wilderness and pastures unknown and escape. No, you pick up the fire extinguisher and believe you can put out the tower inferno of burning people and stuff. No, you don't do that. The character was free to escape,
Yeah.
grabs the gun, goes in. This guy's killed untold amounts of people. What makes you think you can do that? Like that was the bit where, and I think that whole end sequence anyway, for me, just it was a shame because it was actually one of the best horror films I've seen in a very long time. I'm very passionate about horror. I think horror's used a lot, and it's used. I say used in that word, used a lot. But I just felt that unfortunately that last sequence, as good as it sort of seemed, I didn't feel it fit with other areas of the way the portrayal of the story went, which was a shame because I was like all invested up until probably around just a bit before that point. But to be fair, well, I won't take it away. I thought it was an absolute fabulous film, and it was one that I definitely enjoyed a lot more than other horror films that I've seen in recent times.
And what was the last TV show that you watched or are watching?
I would say Westworld.
Right,
Westworld was one. I think that's amazing. That show, I love that show.
Yeah, it's great. And then the very, very last thing is an either or quick fire, just whichever one you prefer. There's no right answers. The Exorcist or The Shining?
Exorcist.
Harking back to your wrestling days, The Rock or Stone Cold Steve Austin?
Stone Cold.
Night Owl or Early Bird?
Night Owl Night Owl for sure.
Music or no music when you're writing?
Oh, there's not an in between. That's a trick. That stumped me, man. I'm in the middle. I do both.
Sometimes. Yeah.
I do both.
Okay. That's allowed.
Yeah, both.
And then the very last one, TV or cinema?
Cinema.
Oh, that was really good. And Marco, you did a fantastic job. Yeah. If anything, I'm worried now that perhaps I'm the one who's bringing the quality down on this podcast.
That's what I say. Yeah,
but no, thank you very much to Leroy. And I have to say, we've chatted to a lot of folk in the past who have self-pubbed and they've brought themselves up from nothing in terms of writing books. But we've never talked to anyone before who's kind of went from nothing in terms of making films. Doing it their own.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I said at the start it was a bit of an inspirational story, and it is in a way to have the bravery to do that and to the wherewithal to get a film made is no easy task.
Much harder than
and to get it on streaming
totally,
services and things like that. So, it is incredible to hear that story. And obviously, he's now working, as he said, on his second film, The Hollow Ones. And he's hoping to go bigger with that. So hopefully it will be a gradual process where he gets more and more budget and is able to make a success of this.
Do you think perhaps that when he originally approached the film industry and said, I want to make a movie, there's a queue of them saying no, and he just chokeslammed his way down the line until he found someone that said yes?
Do you think that was
it's connected.
That was when the record was set?
I think that was his first movie.
Well, thanks anyway to Leroy for coming on to the podcast. Really appreciate him taking the time to do that. And The Last Rite is now available to stream, and is certainly in the UK. I'm not sure worldwide. So if you're a fan of horror, then it sounds like one to catch. So next week there won't be an episode from us because we're taking a short break, just to regroup and give me some time off so that I can spend it with my family instead of editing podcasts.
Marco's been living in the editing suite for the last 6 months, and his kids have grown up without him. So
So yeah, it won't be a long break, but we will be away for a short number of weeks. We have already got some great guest writers lined up for the next episode, next season, and we've got some exciting plans in the pipeline as well. I think it's fair to say.
I'm not sure much to say just now because it's still a bit not locked down yet. But if we've got,
let's not say anything in case it all goes wrong.
Don't say anything, and then whatever happens, we can say that's what we were talking about.
Yeah, we could just sell anything as the exciting plan.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be back with a little twist on the usual format before our next season returns.
Yeah. So we'll speak to you soon. If this was your first episode, there's the whole back catalogue that you can go and check out in the meantime. And if you enjoyed the episode, please do take the time to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or whatever your favourite podcast app is, because it really helps us stay in the charts, which, especially when we're not putting out episodes, is really important so that we continue to get these great guests on the podcast.
Yeah, and of course, if anybody wants to get in touch, they can always send us an email to podcast@rightgear.co.uk or drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @right_gear.
But otherwise, have a great few weeks, and we'll speak to you soon.
See you later.
Well, we hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, be sure to hit that thumbs up button and hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode like these ones down here.
And if you want to get in touch, you can do so by finding us on our social media platforms up here or drop us a comment way down below there.
But otherwise, thanks for listening and join us for the next episode.
See you later.